in your nation's capital today. Joining us now are Democratic Senator from Virginia, ran for Vice President with Hillary Clinton, Senator Tim Kaine. Senator Kaine, good to have you with us.
Hey, John. Good to be with you this morning.
Okay, let's get right down to it. The National Defense Authorization Act, such a big percentage of Virginia's economy dependent on defense spending, the federal government. We're trying to get rid of sequestration by getting rid of these CR so that we get an actual budget done. I can't remember the last time we had that. I think, Jimmy Carter was president maybe. Give us your thoughts on the NDAA, how Virginia made out with it, sir.
John, I think we did well. So we passed it out of the Senate yesterday. The House has passed their version, so now we go into conference and we'll work it out. But the bill came out of committee this year unanimously, which first time that's happened in the 5 years I've been in the Senate. It's the single biggest piece of legislation I work on every year as a member of the Armed Services Committee. And I think the highlights for Virginia are significant investments in the Navy. The Navy is flexible force in a world that is more about flexible force than fixed force. You have to be able to move your force to where the challenge is, and that's what our Navy does and does so well. So the budget is very strong on shipbuilding and on commitments to future shipbuilding. We are still grappling with the effects of sequester and budget caps, and that's hurting us in kind of readiness. In these constrained budget environments, we buy our platforms, but we delay maintenance, we reduce training. We're having a very tough hearing this morning, John, about these recent instances in the Pacific of ship collisions that have killed a number of sailors, including Virginians. Why are these things happening? I have a suspicion that some of the reason they're happening is reduced training that may be related to sequester and budget issues. But look, at least in this NDAA robust shipbuilding program, 2.1% pay raise for military, some particular help for military families, military spouses on credentialing issues if they move from one state to the next, and then a little pet project of mine. I've been trying to get a cyber version of ROTC going, both within the DoD and within the DHS, so talented students at many of our colleges, if they study cyber fields, they can get tuition assistance in exchange for being willing to work for the DoD or other federal agencies to help beef up our cyber defense. And both my DoD and DHS provisions got in the NDAA, and I'm excited about that. I think that'll help our defense, and it'll also offer some good opportunities for some Virginia colleges and students to participate.
Senator Kaine, walk us through. I know we hate to go through the sausage-making process, but you got it out of committee. What happens now?
Well, yeah, it is weird sausage making, John. We got it out of committee. We had it on the floor, and we were going to take it up in July before the summer recess. But bluntly, the majority leader got so mad at John McCain over his vote on health care that he wouldn't allow us to take it up then, punted it into September. We were going to have a fairly vigorous debate about it on the floor with a number of amendments offered. We did eventually get a debate and vote on a critical amendment. Rand Paul introduced an amendment saying that the current authorizations for military force in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan would expire in 6 months. He introduced that to force consideration of a new authorization for military force. I supported the Rand Paul amendment. It did not pass. But on the Foreign Relations Committee, and just for listeners, it's interesting to know that war authorizations, military force authorizations, they don't go through the Armed Services Committee. They go through the Foreign Relations Committee. It's sort of viewed as ultimately a decision for the Diplomacy Committee, not the Armed Services Committee. My chair in that committee, Bob Corker, has shown recent interest in taking up the bipartisan authorization that Jeff Flake and I have in. But now the matter was voted off the floor yesterday, so we're done with it in the Senate, and the next step is to conference with the House, and we actually expect a fairly straightforward conference on this bill.
All right, so you're confident that you're going to get the National Defense Authorization Act that you passed that is now with the House. You're confident that that's going to get basically reconciled without a lot of changes.
I am. Yeah.
Okay, so sequestration, in order to get rid of that, we have to stop these continuing resolutions and actually get a budget passed, right? When do we do that?
We absolutely do. And John, I'm on the Budget Committee. When I got put on it, I was excited. Then I found out in Congress it's actually not that powerful a committee. There is a budget process that could make the budget powerful, but over recent years, it's sort of all gone to the Appropriations Committee. We don't have a budget right now, so when we write up a defense authorizing bill, we're supposed to write a bill up to a number that is given us by the Budget Committee, but the Budget Committee this year, the chair didn't even have us do a budget at all. So we've kind of defaulted to year-end appropriations deals, and by year-end, the year-end is September 30. We never do it by September 30. We always do it in December. So the first thing we do is a 3-month continuing resolution to December, and then we try to reach a budget deal in December. So on the Budget Committee, I'm working with colleagues David Perdue of Georgia, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and Sheldon Whitehouse, Rhode Island, to make some budget improvements to actually make the process meaningful again. I think we should do 2-year budgets like states do. I think we should have a budget that is a calendar year budget because since we always do the deal in December anyway, why have a September 30th budget every other year? That's right before an election. People are busy thinking about their elections, not thinking about the budget. So we need to make an improvement in the budget process, and if we do that, then we can tackle this issue of sequester and budget caps, which has hurt our military and hurt other priorities too.
Yeah, we've got to get rid of it. You got to get that budget, and the CRs don't do anything because the sequestration continues on. We're with Democratic Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine. He's up for re-election for a second term in November 2018. He also, as you know, ran as vice president for Hillary Clinton 2016. Senator, let me just read this text here I got from Sean in Newport News, who says, John, could you please tell Senator Kaine that on paper the Navy is trained, but in actuality we are not. The lack of training of my fellow sailors scared the hell out of me on my 2015 deployment.
Well, so, I'm so glad that Sean texted you that, John. You're going to see me ask questions this morning focusing on that. Surface ship officers used to get a 6-month course on seamanship and other issues. That was changed in 2003 to an online curriculum from a hands-on curriculum. In 2014, it was changed back to a 9-week curriculum. But I'm going to make sure that the investigation that's underway into these accidents digs into, well, why have we reduced training on basic seaworthiness issues? There was a famous resignation letter written on a very popular naval blog a couple of years ago by somebody who basically was making the case, I'm resigning because I don't think we are spending the time on basic seaworthiness training, and it's kind of a check-the-box mentality rather than a real in-depth seaworthiness training. So the fact that Sean has tweeted you that backs up some things I've heard. As you know, I've got a kid in the Marines, and Marines are often deployed, shipboard with Marine expeditionary units with sailors. Got to make sure that the seaworthiness training is ample. And there could be a number of causes for these instances, and there are 2 ongoing analyses, the first of which will be done in mid-October. But I want to make sure that we're digging into the training we're doing on basic seaworthiness. And if Sean is listening to the show and wants to reach out to my office, I hope he does, because that could be helpful for us.
Okay, thank you. I got another 5 texts I can't get into for the purpose of time by people serving in the Navy now, saying that training is old, telling me that training is a major issue that's fallen off, and they're happy that you're looking into it. Let's get to AUMF. Okay, so here's what happens. The exact same thing happened in the House when Paul Ryan, deep sixth AUMF that came out of the Appropriations Committee. Barbara Lee passed it. I had her on my show. And then Paul Ryan shot it down at midnight.
And Barbara Lee passed it with a lot of Republican and Democratic votes. It was very bipartisan. In the committee.
So now the same thing happens in the Senate. It goes down. You only got 32 votes off it. But look, the duplicity in this and the dishonesty is mind-boggling to me, because here's what they say. Well, it doesn't belong in appropriations. Okay, well, they don't bring it up anyplace else.
Yeah.
So the only time they bring it up is when you force it in there.
You and I have talked about this. Nothing has made me more angry in my time up here than the unwillingness of Congress to shoulder the Article I responsibility of doing a war declaration, and to be living off the 2001 authorization, the 60-word authorization, that basically now 3 administrations, Bush, Obama, Trump, have expanded it to basically be the president can take unilateral action against any terrorist group whenever, however, for however long, without Congress saying anything. That's not what the authorization meant. Those who voted for it at the time, that's not what they intended. And if we don't take this power back from the executive, we're just going to be living in a period of perpetual war for the next number of decades. And look, terrorism is real, and we got to battle non-state terrorist actors, but we need to do it with an appropriate legal authorization and congressional oversight. So this has been very frustrating, and you're right. They always tell you, well, let's not take it up here. It's like that scene in Dr. Strangelove when they say, gentlemen, there will be no fighting in the war room. Well, wait a minute. If I can't bring it up, in a defense bill, I can't bring it up in an appropriations bill when we can bring it up. There is jurisdiction on these issues in the Foreign Relations Committees. Jeff Flake and I served together, Republican from Arizona. We've drafted a bipartisan resolution, introduced it in June. We had done one in 2015 that the committee wouldn't take up. But I will say our chair, Senator Corker, has shown more interest recently with a new administration, time to revisit these authorities, and I do believe we'll get to it, but the pace has been agonizingly slow.
You know, Senator, I don't want to appear cynical on my own show, but the only reason that Bob Corker's taken this up is because he might not run for re-election. I mean, this thing is so ridiculous that your job is to go in there and decide when we go to war. That's vested in the Constitution, and your leaders in both parties kick it down the road so they don't have to go on the record. I mean, it's really sickening to me.
It has been a bipartisan and bicameral default of responsibility.
Absolutely.
As you know, I made the argument strongly when President Obama decided to go on the offense against ISIS. I said, I can support this, but you've got to define the mission. Because the reason you do an authorization isn't just some legal nicety or because it's in the Constitution. It's how you define the mission. The executive defines it. The legislative branch asks tough questions and refines it. Then there's a vote which puts the will of the popularly elected body behind sending young men and women into a situation where they're going to be injured or maybe even die. And if we're not willing to have a vote to say that a mission is in the national interest, then, I think it's really immoral that people are, being killed in a war that Congress has been too afraid to debate and vote.
Right word. It is immoral. You know what? There's been a word that I've been searching for, and that's really it. This whole thing with AUMF and no declaration of war has been immoral. And then they lie to us like Ryan lies and says, well, it doesn't belong in appropriations, and they're not going to put it in anything else. All right, I got to move on. I only got a couple more minutes. I got to get to politics, though, Senator. And as you know, we were both very involved in the presidential campaign. You a little bit more than me, obviously running for vice president.
Well, you'll remember I had to eat humble pie and congratulate you since your candidate won, but I had to say, but at least we won Virginia, so I get to claim that.
Well, you did, especially because I was the Virginia State chairman and you kicked my butt. But we did win Super Tuesday, though. That doesn't matter.
Indeed.
But I always come back with that. But you did. You beat me handily. But I did make you come back to Virginia, though, on the final day, right? That's the other thing. Anyway, having said that, so remember when Trump said in the campaign, when they asked him about if he would accept their election results, and he said, well, I don't know, I might want to do a recount, I might want to see if there's voting fraud. And everybody went crazy, especially the legacy media.
Sure,
and he was challenging the Constitution, and it was undemocratic. Now, Hillary Clinton comes out yesterday in her book tour and says, well, with all this Russian stuff going on, I would probably say maybe the election was not valid. Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't that a double standard?
Well, but when she was asked, are you going to do anything about it? I mean, at the time, Trump was asked, would he accept the results, and said, I'm not so sure, meaning would you concede, would you contest? Hillary's not contesting it. She can have whatever opinion she wants. But when she was asked yesterday and said she had no intention to take action, and look, the President Trump is the president and until the next election. And so what we got to do is focus on there's areas where we can work together. I have been having a lot of discussions with the Trump administration, for example, about infrastructure. He's got a good infrastructure team. I don't know yet whether the president is serious about doing infrastructure, but he's got a good team. If they do, we ought to be able to work together. It could be good for Virginia, good for the country. So every day we are, working on issues, some where we could work together, others like the latest effort coming around the bend to repeal Obamacare again in the next 10 days. I'm going to fight tooth and nail against it because it would be bad for the country and bad for Virginia. There's an investigation going on by the special prosecutor and by the Senate Intel Committee. Those will run their course, but we have to be about governing the country every day.
Well, I did buy Hillary's book, and I did read the first 100 pages, and then I was looking for the chapter on why Tim Kaine was the best choice ever for vice president. I couldn't find it. Now, what is that coming? Is that the next book out? Where was that chapter?
Well, you'll have to ask her.
I didn't find the chapter. I was very disappointed in that. And hopefully I'm going to get her on my show to talk about the book, and I'm going to ask her that point blank. All right, almost out of time. Final question. The Cassidy bill going through the Senate trying to repeal Obamacare. Have you seen it? Do you know what it is? Why is it good or bad?
I have seen it, but the CBO has not scored it and is not in a position to score it for a couple of weeks because it is so dramatically different than anything that's been put on the table. And I'll tell you, John, I object, and I think any reasonable person should object to this. They are trying to force through a vote before September 30th on a bill where there will be no CBO score to tell how many millions of people lose insurance and what its effect will be on the state. Now, Virginia has crunched the numbers on the bill, and Governor McAuliffe has said he thinks it will cost Virginia about $1.2 billion in Medicaid between now and 2027. If you block grant, you help some states and hurt others. But there's no way we should be voting on this on the floor without a CBO score. In fact, there's no way we should be voting on it on the floor without letting the relevant committees, the Finance Committee and the Health Committee, take the matter up and hear from patients, doctors, the American Cancer Society, small businesses, insurance companies about whether it's good or bad. You can't take 1/6 of the economy, the largest sector of the economy, and the most important expenditure that anybody ever makes with a dollar in their pocket, their own health. You can't take that and redo it on a snap vote with no CBO score and hurt millions of people. So we're going to fight tooth and nail against it. It's bad for Virginia, bad for the country. I'm on the Health Committee. Refer the bill to the committee. Let the committee have hearings about it and consider it in a deliberate way. We are supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body, after all.
I agree with you. Final question. Bernie Sanders, single payer. What do you think?
Well, here's what I think. Everybody should put their idea out on the table right now. I'm working on the Health Committee with Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray to do a very narrow bill that would stabilize the individual insurance market for the next year or so. Once that's done, we ought to be able to do that in the next 2 weeks. Then, get your bill out on the table and let's talk about it. I tend to favor, instead of single payer, the creation of a public insurance policy, a public option like Medicare that you could buy into, because I want people to have more choices, not fewer. If somebody wants to buy a policy from Anthem or Aetna, I have no problem with that. But I would like to provide a meaningful public alternative so that in any zip code in the United States, whether there were a lot of insurers or not, especially in rural Virginia, rural America, where there tend to be few, you would have an option. So I tend to think that it's better to have more choices rather than fewer, but now's the time to get big ideas out on the table. And just like the Graham-Cassidy bill, that's a big, different idea. Send them all to the committees and let the committees do what we're supposed to do and hear from witnesses and then decide, the next steps we will take.
I know we have to take off, but I don't know why conservatives are opposed to the public options. Just so everybody knows what Tim Kaine is presenting here, the public option is if you want to buy Medicare coverage, you can buy it. I mean, there'll be a price. You buy it like anything else. I don't know. Why are people in opposition for that? That's just another option for people to have where that might make sense for them. I don't get
John,
where the opposition
what I
is coming
find
from.
is that Virginians overwhelmingly support this. You would have to pay for it, so it's not for free.
You have to
they
buy
would
it.
have to set a price that would cover, actuarially the cost of the policy. Because Medicare already operates on a real low administrative burden, they don't have to pay state and local taxes. They don't have to collect a big profit margin. They don't have to pay fancy salaries. They could offer a policy that would be very reasonable. I was in Southwest Virginia, in Appalachia this weekend. Mm-hmm. Out there, you're lucky if there's one insurer that will offer you a policy on the individual exchange. Mm-hmm. And you're lucky if you have one, but if you have one and you don't have competition, you may not like the price. So let's have an available public option in every zip code in the United States, and people can then make the decision about whether they want to buy it or not. We won't force them to. If they want Anthem or Aetna, great. I'm glad you're happy with it, but let's give people meaningful choice, and we can do it in a way that will create competition and bring prices down for people.
Okay, we're out of time. I want to thank United States Senator from Virginia, Democrat Tim Kaine, for being with us today. Senator, I always appreciate you coming on and
John, me too, man.
Spending the time with us. Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
so much. We got to take off. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. More information, timkaine.com. I'll be right back.